My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Agkeran Raiders, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome back to another faction overview, this week detailing the clans of Enedwaith. And note that it is pronounced Enedwaith, by the way. Lots of people say Enedwaith, and that is unfortunately incorrect. And I used to even pronounce it Enedwaith until I read into the pronunciation. Anyway, Enedwaith. Let us not ado at all and move on. So Enedwaith has one of the actual average starting sizes. You're one of the few nations that doesn't just have a single settlement and have to get on with it. So you've got Alkfood in the centre to the north, Baradvin on the edge of the Gwathlo River. You've got Londangren and Caras to the south, and then away to the north in the ruins of Erunvorn you have Dolvorn. Erunvorn, for your interest, used to be a forest that covered pretty much this entire swath of land, and it was harvested by the Numenorians well over like 5,000 years ago now, but the land has never recovered. So your army size at the start is unfortunately though rather small. So each city only really has a couple of units. You've got a general up in the north there with 2 Greyflood Raiders. In Alkfood you've got 2 Enedwaith Hunters. Londangren has Hunters, and Caras has Hunters also. Up in Dolvorn, you get a couple of units as well. There's the unique Erunvorn Woodsman, an early tier interesting unit, as we shall see. Interesting, read, rubbish. Turning then to your custom generals, as we'll go through. So your faction leader is Moot Tremach, and here he stands. This is what your faction leader looks like on the campaign strategy map. It is unique to any faction leader, not to Tremach himself. He comes with Guardians of Enedwaith, your finest unit by some stretch, and quite possibly the best Javelin unit the game has to offer. A very, very useful and strong unit. So that is Moot Tremach. Away to the north, I believe he may be the actual only custom general, although possibly your heir as well. But anyway, there's Foska. That is what a standard Enedwaith general looks like. And Foska comes with the standard bodyguard, the Elder Guildsman. So one of the few bodyguard units that doesn't have bodyguard in the title, which I always like. Variety is the spice of life. Away to the south here, Chieftain Harek is your chieftain, as you might expect, and he has a custom bodyguard of Moot Keepers, who are one of your better units. They used to, for a long time, be your best unit until the Guardians came along, and the Guardians were given the top spot. You've got Erdrek, who rather unfortunately looks like Theodred, down in Londangren. He has a normal bodyguard, but up in Dolvorn, you also have Cameron, who also has a normal bodyguard. You will note that rather unfortunately at the moment you do share your portraits with the Northmen, so with Rohan. Possibly in time we may give Enedwaith custom portrait sets, but at the moment it's not on the horizon. Turning to the family tree, you haven't got one. The clans of Enedwaith, the clue is in the name, is not ruled by a central figure of power, and it fits very, very thematically for them to have a Teutonic system whereby simply the greatest general is the leader. This is also reflected in the clan system of the region, so each clan has a region, and the name of each region in this area is named after the clan that controls it. So your generals come from certain places, and I mean, Medieval 2 isn't the best for creating your own sort of dynasty, but the system is there if you wanted it. So if you had a general you trained from Londangren, although actually you can only ever train generals from Alkfood, can't you? So Lugia will always be your clan leader. Anyway, ignore that. You just don't have a family tree. Enedwaith are one of the what we consider completely neutral nations in the game. You can play it how you want, and your victory conditions are reflective of that. So all you need to do is hold your capital and take 40 regions. It doesn't matter where they are taken from, and it doesn't matter who they are taken from. You just have to take 40. So you can attack anyone, and it won't impede your path to glory, your victory conditions. The area that you start in is not that overly defensible and is quite annoying to defend because the enemy can come from basically anywhere. Your chief enemies, of course, will be Gondor, Isengard, Dunland, and possibly Mithlond, or the High Elves, depending on how aggressive they're feeling in any given day. And also Bree may come for you as well. All of those folks can come basically any way. The only form of defense you have is the crossing of the Gwathlo outside of Lond Dare, because this is the only way across the river other than all the way up at Tharbad, which is often held by Dunland. So that allows you to at least cut off the north of the map without them getting into your heartlands, but the south of the map, it's open season. If you can get to Gondor and shut them down, then you've only got the Nanny Falgay Pass to worry about. And there's a couple of forts there you could possibly commandeer. And way to the south, there is also a fort guarding that one river crossing there as well, where Captain Onku is currently terribly attempting to hide. Perhaps he doesn't realise he's been seen. He's told all the men, just stand still, they won't notice us. Because if you can get down to Thorogrondost as well, there's only a single river crossing there. So it's quite easy to defend Enedwaith from the very, very south. But once the enemy has made it in and past the mountains, you then have some trouble. You'll have some difficulty. Rebel regions, Londare starts rebel, so does Suduri and Bregos, so you can unite this area quite easily. No one will beat you to any of that. Argond, you may be in a rush for, because Dunland and Bree are already there. And Heorot also starts rebel, and it's a bit of a race between you and Dunland to get it. Heorot starts as a castle as well, which with the future changes, when the barracks event is removed, that'll be really important. But at the moment with the barracks event, it's less so. Bregnas does start rebel, but as you can see, Isengard go for it almost immediately. So they will beat you to that, and you'll have to kick up a war with them to go for it. But Gund is also rebel, as is Balorn away to the south. Again, Balorn is a castle, and a very useful one for you at that. Custom battle maps in the area. It is a little devoid of custom battle maps, I'm afraid. Your nearest custom battle map will be Isengard and then the Hornburg. In the future, Tharbad will return to being custom, but at the moment it is not. It is just a large Arnorian city. So, obviously, your settlements are all different from what they look like in vanilla, so there is at least a change, but you don't have any standalone battle maps that you will only fight in one location. So your maps may become a little samey, particularly when you fight against Dunland, because you and Dunland share the same battle maps and model sets. So fighting against Dunland, you'll see the same battle maps sort of over and over, particularly if the fight goes on for a while. Neighbours and diplomacy, we've already talked about everyone that's around you, but who is actually allied to you? Well, as I said, you are a true neutral faction, so no one is allied, nor is anybody your enemy. The only other nation that this applies to when the player controls them is the Arad and Naim. Obviously, as the AI, they start down in Umbar and they have the old alliances that they used to have, but if you play as the AA, you get no enemies and no alliances, and Enedwaith is the only other faction that does that. You are also, nobody actually hates you. The only people you slightly dislike are Gondor. There's a bit of a leaning for you to be an enemy of Gondor, but otherwise it is completely fair game. No one hates you, and you don't hate anyone, as I say, other than Gondor. So there's no guarantee Dunland or Isengard will come at you. They're not preset to hate you, and particularly the High Elves tend to not bother with you, because they put most of their attention into Imladris now, so they'll be focusing over here. So you can go anywhere you want and you can attack anyone you want. There's a lot of freedom as Enedwaith, which is quite lucky and quite handy because your troops, as we will see in the second half, are abysmal. So you need to pick your battles very, very well. Or just rush everyone out of the map. So turning to economy then, well, the Wildmen are one of the nations that are restricted, or the Wildmen factions are restricted. You can't get everything. And the highest tier of town you can get to is a large town. You do not have the knowledge of stoneworking, or real in-depth stoneworking. You're not building huge cities and cities, so you can't get above that. And in the castle tier, you can't go above a castle, so you won't get the third tier of castle. So you're missing 2 tiers of a city, and you are missing 1 tier of the castle. So that does impact you economically, because there are certain buildings you just won't get. Turning to the buildings that you do get, though, Enedwaith do have a bit of an archer leaning, so you do get the Archers Guild, which, remember, just speeds up the replenishment of archers within the settlement it's built in. But you get all 3 tiers, ending with the Elder Hunters Guild. The second tiers of the buildings, again, speed up the replenishment, but they also allow you to train specific units, so that you can train them in locations where you may not otherwise get them, or you can just train them at double speed, for example. So if you get the Elder Gunters Guild, the Elder Hunters Guild, and you are already able to train Agkeran Raiders, then it will simply make your Agkeran Raiders train much, much quicker. Like, really, really quick. Like, probably 1 every couple of turns, which is intended. That's not broken. Turning back to your buildings and any other guilds that we may have, you don't get... no, you do, sorry, it's called the Fighters Pit. It always throws me off when it's called that. So you get the Warriors Hall, but yours doesn't increase your melee weapon bonus at all. It just speeds up the replenishment of melee infantry. And there's a Warriors Hut and a Warriors Hall for you to build there. So there's no melee bonus to that. Enedwaith do get one nice little interesting unique building, which is the fishery, which is unique to them and gives just a nice monetary bonus. It reduces your naval costs. There's a growth bonus in there as well, and only you get the fisherman building. And it's one of those very cool buildings that I really like and I wish we had more of, because it requires the fish resource, which is shown as this little symbol here. So anywhere where you see that, Oh no, hang on, it's this one, isn't it? Can I get my head? There we are. The fishery. It needs a fishery. So anywhere where there is a fishery, you will be able to build the building of fishery. Most of them obviously are on the coast, but you will note that Alkford doesn't actually have a fishery, but Alkford only very recently got access to the coast, so it's not been updated. That fishing village is your port, sorry, actually, not a fishery. But anywhere where you see the fishery, which is the nice little boardwalk area, you can build that building. So that gives you a bit of an economic boost to make up for the loss of buildings later on, particularly because you can build it straight away. So if we're in Londangren, the fishery should be listed there. There it is. And I don't think the second tier of the building requires anything. It requires the barracks event, I think. I should expect. But anyway, so those are some unique buildings. You also get the Union Guild, which we'll talk about in just a moment as we discuss the Union of Enedwaith when we get through to the gameplay aspects. And then that will be able to... that comes with that gives you certain bonuses as well. You do get all the way up to the top of the Master of the Carpenter's building, and that unfortunately is a bug that's present in this version that's been fixed in future versions. But the Carpenter's Guildhouse was made available to Enedwaith right at the death, and we forgot to give it a proper portrait, so it shares the Dunedain one, so you get Dunedain Master Carpenters. So apologies for that. But the buildings are a little restricted, with the one standout, as I say, being that fishery building. So that's those buildings. Your diplomat comes from your unique Great Clan Hall, which is found only in Alkford, and that's where your diplomat comes. The Moot Keepers also come from here, and you can train them relatively slowly before the barracks event and then a bit quicker after it. And it's just a big clan hall, but it serves a second purpose, as we'll see in a moment. You are a ship-faring nation, so you do actually get ships. So if we go again back into the building browser and go to the ports, you get the dragon boat available to you, which is better than a long ship. So in the hierarchy of the seas, there's generic boats, which is called a long ship. That's the first tier. Then there's your dragon boat, and then there's the Gondorian boat, and then there's the Elven boat. Or Dunedain boat rather than Gondor. So there's those 4 tiers of boats. So anyone who gets... all the other naval nations get the long ship, or they'll be Dunedain and they'll get the Dunedain ship, or they'll be Elven and they'll get the Elven ship. Oh, the Ardenaim get their own ship as well, so there are 5, sorry. So you are second. So you'll beat every other naval nation unless they are renowned. So you won't beat Gondor, Dol Amroth, Ardenaim, or the Elves. But you will outclass nations such as Dale and Dorwinion and Rune, but you're unlikely to fight their boats. But it's just a little bit thematic. So you get a stronger boat than everyone else because you are a seafaring nation. So that works in your favour. Lastly, I do believe you also do get the advanced blacksmith. Yes, you do. And because you're such a backwards nation, for want of a much better word, you can get the advanced blacksmith in quite a few locations. Do check the official changelog, which is linked in the description of all of these videos, the faction overviews. And there is a list which tells you where you can build that building. I don't plan on going through and reading out every single region. So that brings us on then to gameplay events. Well, the Enedwaith have 2 scripts. The first is the Moot System. So the clans of Enedwaith come together in a moot and they discuss the path that Enedwaith might take. And it's a very simple script with no real major rewards or bonuses or outcomes. The point of it is to add a bit of flavour to your early expansion. So a moot message pops up on the first turn, and it pops up every now and then, and it just basically gives you a task. It's a better version of the council system. So it will say, we think you should attack Londare, or we think... there's certain points, there's sort of scripted attacks that will happen on some of your towns, but they're never anything major. It's always just a minor bit of flavour, and you get plenty of warning. So when you take Londare, I believe there's a warning message that says that the clans of Sarahline have decided they want it back, and they're coming to take it. So then a small army will spawn and attack you. At the end of the Moot System, it ends with a decision between you choosing Saruman and sort of siding with him, which gives you a load of money but turns you against all of the good nations. Or you can either, I don't think it's side with Gondor, I think it's sort of stay neutral. But there's no real reward other than the Isengard path will give you a chunk of money. And other than that, though, it just allies you to certain nations or otherwise. So there's no grand change to your gameplay at all. It's just a nice little simple script that enhances your early expansion. And then if you wish to, it lets you align more with Isengard if you're thinking of that. We do plan to overhaul it in the future because at the moment, if we are being completely honest, it is objectively better to take Isengard's offer, because they pay you something like 15,000 gold coins, and then even if you don't want to actually be allied with them, just break the alliance on the next turn and go about your business. And there you are, you get a one-off payment of 15,000 coins. So we do plan to change it up, because we want to keep Enedwaith as neutral. We don't want the end of this Moot system forcing you to be good or bad. So we do plan in the future to amend the Moot system. But at the moment, the reason why I've not gone into massive detail about it is because it's very small, it's very simple, it has no real gameplay effects, like gameplay overall changes, like massive changes that will change how you play Enedwaith. It just simply adds a bit of flavour at the beginning. The other script is, of course, uniting Enedwaith, which then unlocks the Guardians unit. So the Guardians, your best unit, is locked behind the Union of Enedwaith. To unite Enedwaith, you simply have to control all of the regions of this area, and they are very handily listed for you in the Great Clan Hall. So at the bottom there, within the hall, the plans to unite Enedwaith are also discussed. Here it is formally agreed that the following regions must all succumb to the power of the Clan Hall in order to rise as a single nation. And then it lists them all out. Nelchaloon, Malfin, Caladir, blah, blah, blah. All of those regions are region names, not town names, so you'll have to learn how to right-click. Because, for example, there's Lafiren, and there's Lafiren at the end there. It does, as you will note, include all three regions of Dunland, because this is all Enedwaith. Dunland is just a small sub-region of Enedwaith. You'll note that on any map that you see. We've also extended, even though Enedwaith technically ends at the Gwathlo, and this is the region of Minhiriath, we have included some of the regions up here because traditionally they are Enedwaith regions. I'm speaking primarily of Erun Vaughan, of course, away to the north. So it is essentially every region from the White Mountains, following up, ignoring, I believe it doesn't include Derwith or Eisenrun, and then it's Dunland proper, cuts in at the Swanfleet and down the Gwathlo, but then it's Argond, Suduri, Bregost, and Erun Vaughan, or Dolvaughan. Once you've united the clans, it unlocks that unique building as well, which we had at the end, the Union Guild, the Enedwaith Guild Hall, which gives you the Guardians of Enedwaith themselves. It gives the melee weapon bonus, then comes in, and a small public order bonus. So it's a nice building that improves all your troops, but primarily you want it because it gives you the Guardians. And they are your only real powerhouse unit. They can stop basically any army. Or they can stop any troop anyway. They are feared the world over because we made them as powerful as, within the bounds of Enedwaith's sort of grand plan, we made them as powerful as we could. The building, the Union Guild, is only available in the regions of Enedwaith, so in the regions you had to unite to claim it. But I would just stress again that the regions are listed in the Great Clan Hall, so you can keep track of where and what you need. You don't just have to guess at what your expansion is. Those are the only scripts for Enedwaith. I am very sorry to say that the ring script for Enedwaith was never amended. The ring script is archaic at this point, and so playing as Enedwaith, regardless of how you've chosen to play as them, the ring script for you will always suggest that you are good. It doesn't give you the option to hold the ring, to give the ring to Sauron, even if you've chosen to be evil. So you will always have to take the ring, either have to take the ring up to Imladris and then go and destroy it, or just hold on to it until Gollum eventually steals it. Those are your only choices, I'm afraid. We do, again, in future, we will revamp, hopefully, the ring script so that almost every nation has the option to do all of the three things. So that if you have role-played the game as an upstart to Sauron, for example, then you can still destroy the ring, with certain exceptions. But that's not for this video. But for the moment, Enedwaith with the ring, you are good, technically. Now, turning to the difficulty of Enedwaith, this is where it's an interesting one, because technically Enedwaith's units are outclassed by almost everything around you, but the neutrality that you get and the speed with which you get your early tier units, I don't actually think Enedwaith is very hard, because rushing is a very powerful tactic in Divide and Conquer. And if you do rush your nearest enemies, your nearest threat enemies, which is Isengard, Gondor, and the High Elves, then you can actually deal with them very early doors and take the difficulty away. So I'm going to say that Enedwaith is only a 3 in difficulty, about bang in the middle. Primarily because if you do rush, it is a lot easier. Dunland are not a threat to you. Dunland and you have about the same tier troops, so you'll always be able to beat them. Same with Bree. It's only the High Elves, Isengard, and Gondor. The High Elves can be kept at bay and appeased through diplomacy, so you may never even have to fight them. They're unlikely to attack you. Gondor are very unlikely to attack you because they have their hands full with both Khand and Mordor, so they're always busy in the east. You can quite easily strike up an alliance with them. And that just leaves rushing Isengard out of the game, which can be done. And if you put pressure on Isengard, Rohan will absolutely walk all over them. So by using some sterling diplomacy, you can make the situation around you rather easy, thus paving the way to take out the few remaining nations that are about as strong as you anyway, so there's no challenge there. However, if you decide to turtle as Enedwaith, claim the regions around you that are rebel, and sit tight and wait, the campaign will be very challenging because you are outclassed very quickly by those surrounding nations. And if you come up against late game High Elves, Gondor or Isengard, you're in for a real challenge unless you've united the clans and you've got the Guardians, or you're just very, very good at the game. You don't even need to be that good at the game, but your best unit is only as good as their medium tier unit, so you are completely outclassed at that point. So it's up to you. It's one of those factions where the difficulty is up to you, is what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way. If you want the campaign to be easy, use some diplomacy, take away the hard nations through gifts and gold, and then you can easily take out Dunland and Bree. If you want the campaign to be hard, then sit back, wait, let them get powerful, and then try and take on the world. It's up to you. But I'm going to put it as a 3 because of that choice. You can make it easier or hard. So now we'll jump over to the battle map as usual and show you what all of their nice looking hide anywhere units. Welcome then to the Enedwaith battle map, and a quick overview of Enedwaith shows that you do have options in each category, but you are primarily an infantry nation. Of course, there's a lot of javelins interspersed amongst that large gathering of infantry, but there are a few archer units, at least one at each tier, and you've got 3 types of cavalry with chariots at the end. I have also included in this episode, and we will talk about them first actually because they are completely unique, and that is the Druidine Warriors. So Druidine are only available as mercenaries, or Druidine Hunters, sorry, but they're available to you as Enedwaith. So I've had to put them in as an ally because we had too many units, but so these are available as mercenaries in the regions that the Druidine live in, which is the far west of the map to the west of the White Mountains, just north of Andrast. And they are also available, of course, just north of Minas Tirith in the province that is known as Honorian, in the forest there, but it has to just be the whole province. So those are the locations that you can get them. On paper, they're not really very good at all. They've got no armor at all. Their defense is only 4, which is all defense skills, so very low defense. Melee attack is 3, but missile attack is 4, and their missile attack is poison arrows. So they serve a benefit in being very good archer units that lower the morale of enemies. They also have a spear with their secondary weapon, so they get a bit of a bonus against cavalry. But note that their low armor stat means they are really, really easily killed. So do watch out for that. But if you do want to train them, they're available as mercenaries around the Enedwaith area, and you are one of the peoples that can train them. So they're available to you, and those are what they look like. The Druidine. It was certainly in DAC anyway. They're based on a Native American model from the Americas campaigns. But now we move over to Enedwaith's proper roster, and we start at the first, what is arguably the trash tier, because their stats are so poor, and those are the clansmen. But before we talk about an individual unit, it is very worth noting the number of units that can hide anywhere, or stalk, as it is now called in later games. But there are a lot of your roster, over 50% of the roster can hide anywhere, and the ones that can't hide anywhere at least can hide in the second tier of hiding in trees, which means they can hide in a very small gathering of trees. So you're a very ambush heavy faction. Almost everything in your first tier hides everywhere, which is a joke. Most of your armies will be hidden. You'll also note, as I've already mentioned, there are plenty of javelin troops running through, 5 in fact, which is fantastic. So you've got lots of javelin options as well. 6 if you include the guildsmen, who were changed from archers to be javelins as well. So now we can start. Enedwaith clansmen are your first, and they are poor. 3 total defense, which is 111, 4 attack and 3 charge. No, not very good at all. But they only cost 270 coins, which means their upkeep is probably about 100 gold coins a turn, which is nothing. Note that they're quite fast, but they have poor morale. So they don't really have a purpose beyond swarming your enemies with them. You'll get a lot of clansmen available to you. They don't kill very much, and they die very easily, but they're cheap as chips, so you can swarm your enemy with them. Supporting them and being slightly better, but coming from Erin Vaughan only, are the Woodsman, the Erin Vaughan Woodsman. Now, they are just spearmen. They're not... I don't think they are pikes. No, they're halberdiers, sorry. They have a halberdier animation. They are halberdiers. They're one of the few halberdiers that is not armor-piercing. Their attack is only 2, their charge is only 2, their total defense is 5. So they're not fantastic, but they're your first proper dedicated cavalry killer for some time, to be honest, until you get up to the River Spearmen at the 2nd tier. They only come from Erin Vaughan, though. Then they're better than the clansmen, it has to be said. Their defense is much better, and their attack and charge, however, is a little less, though. So they're a more defensive version of the clansmen, but they only come from Erin Vaughan. You also get a strike infantry at this tier, which is the Grey Flood Axemen. Again, hiding anywhere. Charge bonus is only 5, total defense is only 5, but their attack is 7 and effective against armor, which is good in the early game. But their poor defense, and coupled also with their only average morale and response, makes them not fantastic. But actually, as an early game strike infantry, they are very good, because they do have average morale, not poor morale. But as the game progresses, of course, they swiftly get outclassed. Their total defense of 5 is not fantastic, and they should be kept out of contact of the enemy for as long as possible, and only used to flank or strike the enemy. Note that they're very quick again. Enedwaith have a very quick roster, primarily because they have hardly any armor. Also, almost every single Enedwaithian unit has excellent stamina, because they are hardy folk that live off the land. And that's really all there is to say about that. We move on then to your first Javelin force, the Grey Flood Raiders. Now this one is just a stock Javelin unit, and by that I mean the Javelin has not yet been enhanced, as it is as we move through the line. They can hide anywhere again. The Javelin is 7 damage, which is pretty good. The melee attack is only 2, but their defense is 5. So they have a better defense than your clansmen, but a worse attack. Their Javelin is what you want them for. Their Javelins are useful. Do note that Enedwaith Javelins across the board are more accurate at their tier than any other Javelin. So their accuracy is high. If an Elven Javelin unit had high accuracy, or a Dwarven Javelin unit had high accuracy, they would actually be lower in accuracy than an Enedwaith Javelin. Also, Enedwaith are one of the few nations who get more missiles per Javelin man than any other nation, and they have a greater range than anyone else as well. We've really gone ham on them being a Javelin-focused faction. So that's what they are. They don't like fighting in Baron, but otherwise they are happy everywhere else. So, and you've got bonuses from the terrain in basically every region, bar 1 or 2. So do get used to reading the green books for where the Baron regions are. Again, excellent stamina, and their cost is very, very low again. I can't show you because they're technically a mercenary unit, so it only says varies, but their cost is cheap. Don't worry about that. Now, supporting them are the Enedwaith Hunters. And again, they are hiding anywhere, which is what they do wonderfully well. They have good stamina, so not excellent stamina, unfortunately. Poor morale response, terrible defense, 2 melee attack, 2 charge, but a 2 missile. 2 missile attack at this early tier is not that bad, particularly when there's 190 of them. So get 3 units of these, for example, and that's almost closing in on, well, it's 570 men firing that 2 missile attack. So it does stack. Small missile numbers don't matter too much. You will still get kills. They're very, very cheap again, but they are still trash archers. So they won't survive if the enemy shoots back, and they won't survive in melee. You need to keep them at range. That's their only benefit to you. Poor morale response, 24 missiles, 160 on the range, and only average accuracy. And again, one of the few units that only has good stamina. And lastly, you do get a cavalry unit at the earlier tier, the Grey Flood Horsemen. And they are mounted Javelineers. Is that a word? I think it is. They are effective against armor, which, note, the Grey Flood Raiders are not, but the Grey Flood Horsemen are. So they have an armor-piercing javelin. They also have 2 extra points on their javelin attack, I suppose gaining momentum from the horse in the throw. The melee attack, though, is still only 2, and the charge is 3, with a defense of 5. So once they've finished with their javelins, they are only good at charging into the back of a unit where they're not going to take any damage, or chasing down routing units. They're awful cavalry, absolutely awful cavalry, but they're fantastic javelineers, so use them for that. They have poor morale, but an average morale response. They don't get a movement speed bonus, so they're stock cavalry speed. 6 missiles again, 70 range, high accuracy once again. So those are all of your trash units, and then we move to what is considered your militia, which is already the middle tier for Enedwaith. So just once again showing you that you are lower than everyone else in terms of damage and output, and just generally how good your units are. So then the river units come and join us, and we'll start with the Spearmen because this is the first available everywhere actual anti-cavalry unit. The River Spears. Again, hiding anywhere. Again, excellent stamina. They can shield wall rather than Shiltram. Their attack is relatively low as it is for most Spearmen, so the attack is 3 and the charge is 4, but the defense is nice and high at 12. So they'll defend. That is Spearmen's purpose. It is not to kill the enemy, it's to hold the enemy in place while something else kills them. And they perform that role admirably. Their morale is average, their response is average, but they do get, again, a speed bonus. A bonus? They get a speed bonus. So Enedwaith's roster is slightly faster than most other human nations. Their cost is only 480 for your militia unit. So again, numbers are a big feature of Enedwaith's roster. You need the numbers in order to ensure you can outclass people, or rather outspam them. Supporting them are the River Swordmen, and again, as with Spearmen and Swordmen are the same category, it's always the same thing. They have a lower defense, but they have a higher attack and charge. So they are more aggressive than your spears, but they pay for it by losing a little bit of armor, or a little bit of defense overall. Again, average morale response, but again, slightly faster. And as with all Enedwaith, don't like Baron, but they like everything else. And then we come to the Agkeran Raiders. Now, this is the first Javelin unit that will really start to make the enemy regret fighting Enedwaith, because they have an armor-piercing Javelin. Now, obviously, the Greyflood Raiders, or Riders, sorry, also had an armor-piercing Javelin. But the Greyflood Riders being poor cavalry means they will often die before they get a use in, whereas the Agkeran Raiders you can protect better, because they are not on a horse, so they don't have a giant hitbox. They also get bonuses against mounts with their javelins, as all javelins do, but it's the effective against armor that makes them quite unique. The other thing that you can't see from this message, because the game only gives you certain bits of information, is that their javelin, whilst being armor piercing, is also body piercing. So it will go through more than one unit. Oh no! Actually, no! Ignore that. That was shared off for the right River Elders. So it used to be, but it isn't anymore. So they're armor piercing only, but their javelin attack is now 8. Again, they only get 5 missiles instead of 6. Their range is 60 meters, but their accuracy is still high, still faster than most other units. Average morale and average morale response, but they only come from the coast, so you need a coast settlement to train them. The total defense is 10, which is nice. They will actually survive some enemy attacks. They have a shield, which helps against enemy arrow fire. And their charge bonus is 3 with their melee attack of 6. So they're significantly better in melee than Greyflood Raiders. But you do pay for it because they're a bit more expensive. But again, we're talking very low numbers for the cost across the board for Enedwaith. You can get a lot of units. Then we move on to Sarahline Mercenaries. Sarahline Mercenaries only come from the region of Sarahline, and the town there is called Suduri. It's just to the west of Londare. They are, again, a halberdier unit. They're basically a better version of the Erunvorn Woodsman, because now they are effective against armor, and they have a much better overall stat. So the Woodsman had a 2 attack and a 2 charge with a 5 defense, and the Mercs have a 4 attack with a 4 charge and an 8 defense. So it's almost double better. Twice as good is better English, and they are effective against armor, as I've already mentioned. So a good unit to have. They only come from one place, so do try and get them on board. You also then at this tier start with archers. We always start with archers. You then get a better archer unit, the River Archers. And here they are. So the River Archers are just a direct upgrade on the Hunters, as you'd expect. So where the Hunters have 2 defense and 2-2-2 across the board, the Rivers have 3-3-3 and 5. So just 1 better in all the attack stats, but 5 in the defense. So they'll survive a little bit better, but still note these are very low numbers still. So they will not survive in melee if an enemy reaches them, but with 3 missile damage they will start getting better, much better kills. They don't cost a significant increase from the Hunters, so you can still get many of them. 180 meters on the range this time with average accuracy and 24 missiles, which means they just slightly outrange the Enedwaith Hunters, but otherwise they are very similar in terms of actual archers. And lastly then we move over to the River Scouts. We fly past Enedwaith's roster. The River Scouts are your first dedicated cavalry, and even then they're not very good. 8 total defense, 4 attack and a 5 charge. They're good at routing enemy units and chasing down enemy units, but they're not very good in it head-on against anything really. But do note that they do get a bonus against cavalry, so they are cavalry, they're anti-cavalry cavalry, which is always quite nice. It gives them a purpose. Their morale is average, their morale response is average, but no movement speed bonus. They're decidedly average cavalry, but for the cost, they're not too bad. You can again get plenty of them, and they'll outnumber a better unit and use their bonus against cavalry to certainly kill any cavalry you might come across. But Isengard don't really get any cavalry. Dunland's cavalry is as bad as yours. Bree's cavalry is as bad as yours. The only real cavalry you're going to be fighting is early tier Gondor, if you get through to Rohan, of course, and the High Elves have significantly better cavalry than you can ever dream of having. So that's where they will shine. But against Dunland and Bree, your chief adversaries, there's not many cavalry units you'll face. But then we come to your elite units, and we'll start with the Minhiriath Warriors, because they sort of apply a sort of halfway house. They should really be one between this tier and the tier before. But they are fantastic strike infantry. They can hide anywhere, which is really useful for strike infantry, so you can get them to the flanks quicker. They frighten enemy infantry they go up against, but they aren't armor piercing, so watch out for that. But their attack is 13 with an 8 charge, which is fantastic. So they're really high damage dealers on that charge. Their total offense, though, is only 12, which is the same as the tier below. So you've got to watch out if the enemy turns around. Also note that their defense skill is 10 of that 12. So enemy arrow fire will shred them. If they get shot by an arrow, they may as well. It's basically every arrow will kill them. They have a terrible defense against arrow fire. So you've got to ensure you keep them hidden and charge them in just at the right moment. They, again, have the speed bonus. They've got better morale, and they've got the best possible morale response that Medieval 2 can have. So they'll deal with morale shocks very, very well, and their morale's slightly higher. But do note that the reason they're up at this tier is because of their very good attack. Their defense stats are really, really bad. So really do try not to keep them in prolonged melee, and definitely don't let them get shot, because they will die. But then we come to the Moot Keepers. We've spoken about these a great deal. This is your elite available everywhere unit. So you can get these everywhere. As I say, this is your elite unit, and it is only as good as really just medium mid-tier for other factions. At best, top mid-tier. But for you, it is fantastic, and it's elite. But it isn't elite in the grand scheme of things. But it does get a movement speed bonus. The morale is only average. The morale response this time is good. Adept at hiding in wood, so as I say, they get the second tier of the hiding bonus. They like fighting in the forest. They have an attack of 8 and a charge of 4 with a 17 total defense. They're just decidedly useful warriors, particularly for you. They're one of the best units that you've had to date, and will serve you very, very well in the coming wars. But against other nations, they're not going to win any grand awards, so do watch out for that. You also, at this tier, get the River Elders, who I've spoken of greatly, and they complement the Moot Keepers quite nicely. They are skilled against mounts with their Javelin, and they're skilled against mounts with their Spear. But note, they don't have an armor-piercing Javelin, and they don't actually have a body-piercing Javelin, and now that I think about it, that's the Guardians only. So their Javelin is rather standard, but it does have a very high missile attack of 10. Their melee attack is then 7 and 5, which is very good for a Spear unit, and their defense is 15. So the Moot Keepers are better all round, but the River Spearmen, or River Elders, sorry, are an anti-cavalry unit, both with the Javelin and with the Spear. So they're your late-game anti-cav. Their morale is only good, response is average. Their speed is slightly higher than the Moot Keepers. They have 5 Javelins to throw. They have very high accuracy, and their range is 60 meters again. So a very good anti-cav late-game unit. And lastly, you get a very, very unique unit, which doesn't appear very much in the game at all, but we've popped them back in. And they are the War Chanters. 2 things that make them unique. First, they are a battalion of all women, and so they speak like a woman when you click on them, which is nice. It's nothing worse than having a lady unit that then sounds like a man. They inspire your troops by just being alive, but they also have the chanting ability, which inspires all troops across the battlefield. Although, actually, I think it is only nearby troops, but it's a larger bracket than the standard inspires nearby troops. When they chant, they become unusable to you, but they will just boost the morale of everything around them quite substantially. So it's good to have them at the back of your melee line, chanting away, keeping everyone happy. They can hide anywhere. They frighten the enemy infantry as well. When they actually do come to battle, they are very, very good, with a 10 attack and a 16 defense, which is nicely separated between armor and defense skill. And their charge bonus is 5. So they're a good aggressive unit, but note there's only 47 of them, so they won't be killing very many things, and they can be stun-locked quite easily because they are not relentless. They have good morale, average morale response, and they're one of your fastest units at 115%. So a very useful unit to keep the low morale of much of your army up and high, so do use them well. And lastly, then we come to the best Javelin unit the game has to offer. Now, we are certain that body piercing and armor piercing is here. So, They have armor-piercing javelins, and, as I've mentioned, they have body-piercing javelins, which means the javelin will go through multiple units, which means they absolutely shred anything they throw their javelin against, because it will hit the entire battalion. They also can place stakes. They're one of your few units that can place stakes. In fact, they're your only unit that can. They inspire your forces, and they get a bonus against cavalry with, obviously, their javelin. All javelins are good against cavalry, but they also get a bonus with their secondary weapon, which is a two-handed spear, or just a spear. They don't have a shield, but they have a large spear once they've finished with their javelins. They have very good morale, impetuous morale response. They are the only unit that does not get a speed bonus on the ground. They get 5 missiles again with very high accuracy and 70-meter range. So a very, very good unit. Unfortunately, it doesn't list the body piercing, so on paper they don't appear to be fantastic. But when you include the body piercing, they really are. They have a 10 missile attacks, so the same as the River Elders, but now boosted with the body piercing and armor piercing. They get the melee attack of 7 and a charge of 8. Remember, they are spearmen once they've finished with their javelins. They have a total defense of 20 as well, which is your highest defense, particularly this time in armor. They are your most armored unit, so do watch out for armor piercing enemies, as they will give them a bit of a challenge. They have a very high cost, but they pay for themselves and then some. They can take down... Many a time people have done tests and shown the Guardians of Enedwaith to take down the Smiths of Eregion with little trouble, so they really can pay for themselves and then some. Just before we just move on to the Bodyguard, just spend a moment looking at the cool new banner that Matt's made for Enedwaith some time ago, which is considerably better than what they had before, and it's just a nice sort of Celtic theme on the banner. And lastly then, your Bodyguard, who used to be an archer but has been changed to a javelin, so... keeping in theme with the roster. They're effective against armor with the javelins. I don't think they're body piercing, but they can hide anywhere. So your secondary general, if you've ever got an army with more than one general, your second one can hide anywhere. The first general, your main general can never hide. That's a feature of Medieval 2. Melee attack is 8, charge is 5, missile attack is 8, and total defense of 15. When they finish with their javelins, they are, I believe, two-handed swordmen, but we should be able to see in this battle as someone will attack them, I have no doubt. They have 70-meter range, very high accuracy, and 4 missiles, with only good morale and good morale response. So the key thing to note from Enedwaith is that your morale is very low. You do not have very good morale at all, so you've really got to watch out for that. And your units can hide anywhere. So to make up for your poor morale, you need to be ambushing the enemy as much as possible to make them take the morale hit so that you don't, is essentially how you play as Enedwaith. And use your war chanters. Always use your war chanters in battle, because they will keep your army alive, where otherwise without them your morale is just really bad. You're up there with like goblins in terms of bad morale. Because, of course, the goblins of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's goblins are not the type to fight until the death. They don't relish battle. They don't live for battle. They run away like cowards frequently. So then we come to who are we up against next time. And here's the army before us. Now, there's one giant indication of who we're up against here. And they're running across your screens on the left-hand side there. There's only 2 nations in the whole game that get that unit, so it should give some indication. There's a lot of green going on here, which is the key giveaway of who it may be. But they're about to bash into those Druidine Hunters, who will probably run away just before the battle kicks off, I would have thought. Let's test out how the insert button works. Ah, there we are. We're playing against the Woodland Realm, as our allies get charged into by the Ents. Ents are available to both Lothlorien and the Woodland Realm, but you can only get them in Fangorn Forest, but you can train them. There's our fantastic looking units, the Elder Council running through there. There's the Hobbit-inspired designs of the Elven King's Guard charging through the centre with their Darth Maul-inspired weapons. And then there's green and brown, very much sums up the Woodland Realm roster, as you might expect, because they fight in forests, actual green and brown forests, so they would wear green and brown. There's the Hinidaur charging through the centre. They've been given a new look in version 4.5, which looks very, very nice indeed. Nice, smooth, straight lines. The Arathirith, the Royal Guard, charging through as well. A very nice looking unit there. And there's the Silverthorn arrows that we did include from Battle for Middle-earth, because it wasn't beyond the realms of impossibility, but then they have little streams behind the arrows, which I think look very cool. But we need the enemy to charge into our enemy so that we can see what secondary weapons some of our units use. Our javelins are throwing away there and shredding the Woodland Spearmen down into nothing. as the Ballastai fire away on the Druidine. They're wasting Ballastai on Druidine Hunters. Ridiculous. Oh dear, the Elven King's Guard charging in on our cavalry. They'll be taking those out, I have no doubt. Did our Guardians get into combat just yet? I'd like them to, because I'm not entirely certain if they have a halberd or a spear. And I foolishly didn't check that, did I? The Chariot's being utilised terribly by the AI. It's almost as if I'm controlling them. They're just leaving them there to die. Chariots are terrible if left in battle because they have huge hitboxes. So they get hit by everything and then some. So it's very difficult to keep them alive. The elves, of course, they will win this battle because they have armor upgrades and weapon upgrades and all sorts of upgrades. But anyway, there we are. That concludes the episode. We won't wait for the Guardians or the Bodyguard to get into combat. It doesn't matter too much. You'll find out for yourself what type of weapon they have. But that will conclude, and next week we will do the Woodland Hunters. If you are interested in Warhammer gameplay, I did record 4 episodes of Eltharion the Grim campaign with the release of the DLC, and they'll be linked in the end screens that are probably popping up now. Before that, for now, that concludes the faction overview. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. And if you have any questions about Enedwaith, do post them in the comments below. Or indeed head over to Discord. And until we speak again, dear friends, Nevair Neden Pedimad Melonin, and farewell.